Right, morning, Group C, or shall I say good evening, because this is supposed to be your twilight, your 4:30 until 7:30 session. I'm just going to do a video for today. I'm not going to do any live Zooming at 4:30. I think that, we've worked hard enough this week. It's been a long week, and the last thing that you need is me taking up your time till like 6:30. So what I'll do, as soon as I have recorded this, I'll upload it, and I'll give you some deadlines. But obviously, you can engage with this evening. You can engage with this Saturday, Sunday, or, before I see you. First thing I want to show you is in your Group C classroom, what I've just stuck in there. If you haven't seen it, the lesson that I taught you on Wednesday, you've got the video and you've got the resources that we use. You can have a look at all that there. That's exactly what was in your lesson. And I said that was the video that I used for my other group. That goes through the basic economic problem. Now, what I've also put in, nothing to really worry about as yet, is something called exam question structures. Okay, if I just bring this up for you, I will give this out on paper as well, but this is what needs to go into each type of question. So I'm going to set you a piece of homework today which looks at a 12 marker. So what we need to do, P means paragraph, okay? So for a 12 marker, paragraph 1 you need to define. You then need 2 issues developed. So you're going to give me 2 answers to the question. So that's going to be 2 paragraphs of analysis of 2 issues. And then paragraph 4 and paragraph 5 are your evaluations, or your counterpoints. But I will go through that with you towards the end of this video. All right, let me lose that then. What we are going to do today, sorry, this is all getting a bit boring, is the idea of positive and normative statements. Don't forget, as with Wednesday's lesson, this is still part of economics theme 1. Let me just show you that. So this is part of Tim's theme, and for the next 2 weeks or so I'll be teaching that, and then we'll stop and we'll move on to macro. My mouse is gone, there it is. And don't forget, this weekend you do need to be going out and getting yourselves 2 folders, 2 ring binders, 1 for Tim and 1 for me. All right then, so we're going to talk today about the language of economics. We're going to talk about economics as a social science. We're going to learn a bit of Latin. It's all good stuff. Now, obviously, this lesson actually is a bit better taught in front of a class rather than on a video. So you're going to have to think about this stuff yourself. First question is this: what is the difference between these 2 statements? His new car is green and his new car is a terrible shade of green. I could sit here and give you 30 seconds to think, but obviously you can just pause the video now and have a think. I'm now going to give you the answer, okay? His new car is green is a fact. In terms of proof for that, I can prove it by standing next to a green car, maybe going to like B&Q and getting, I don't know, there's like paint samples that you can get, or the little cards with paint samples. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Google it. I can get a shade of green. I know that that is green. I can stand next to the car and that is green, so I can prove it. The second statement, his new car is a terrible shade of green, is a bit more difficult. We're still talking about the green car. I'm still standing next to the green car, but I'm now applying my own opinion, my own bias, my own prejudice against that car. His new car is a terrible shade of green. I hate green, okay? So the language changes the statement, even though the sentiment of the car being green is the same. All right. So according to the edXL Economics A specification, you need to know 3 things. We need to be able to tell the difference between a positive and a normative economic statement. And I've just spoken to you about positive and normative economic statements. And by the end of today, you should be able to work out what type of statement those 2 green car comments were. We're going to talk to you about value judgments and decision making within economics. And we're also going to start off by thinking about why economics is a science without any scientific experiments. Okay, so let's go straight in to this awful first page. All right, there's so much text, but let's break it down. Why is economics a social science with no experiments? Okay, and there's a bit of Latin up there on the title. I'm not going to worry about that yet. So social sciences, like economics, like psychology, psychology is a social science, I think. Definitely like sociology. Involve the study of human beings, and we're looking at human behaviour. We're also looking at groups and how people interact with each other. The issue with science is that, say you're doing chemistry and you're looking for the acidity of something. You get one of those little pH strips, you shove it into the substance, and you get the reading. There's no argument with that. Science almost dictates that the pH of this solution is whatever it is, okay? But when we're talking about social science, people, individuals, groups, there's always going to be a bit of personal prejudice, and there's always going to be a bit of opinion. Now, we as teachers aren't supposed to give you our opinions, okay? I don't really kind of go down that line. I, for example, think Brexit is a terrible idea, okay? There's my opinion. So whenever we're teaching, and as kind of economics moves on in the future and we have to teach Brexit as part of the specification, I can't go in and say, here are the benefits of Brexit, because I don't think there's going to be many benefits. I'll have to teach it as fact, but I can also give my opinion. I'm a social scientist as an economist, but I don't have a laboratory, okay? And even if I did have a laboratory, I can't control the conditions. In a science laboratory, once you shut that door, you're the master of the conditions, okay? You control the temperature, you control the light, etc., etc. In social sciences, we can't do that. And whenever we do tests, these results are going to be very dynamic, and the results may change from one day to the other. The pH of solution, whatever it is always going to be that pH, okay? So the results are non-dynamic, but in economics, things change all the time. So it's really difficult to actually make scientific experiments. How do we get around this? There's two ways of doing it. Now, the first one is by using Latin, okay? When we build economic models, so with Tim, when you were looking at the demand curve, everything was to do with, now, you can pause the video, all right? That word in red, beginning with the C, beginning with the P, how would you pronounce it, all right? If you want to think about it, pause the video now, otherwise I'm going to tell you. I bet you said it was ceteris paribus. No. My knowledge of Latin suggests that it's ceteris paribus. I've taught this for 20 years, and I've taught ceteris for 17 of those 20 years. It was only when a colleague of mine said you've been pronouncing it wrong, okay? Anyway, ceteris paribus means all other factors remain the same, okay? And I'll explain that in a minute. The study of economics is kind of like working in a laboratory when we apply ceteris paribus to it. For example, when economists raise the price of a good or service, they assume that all other factors remain the same. For example, we've shut the door of the laboratory, we're doing an experiment looking at the price of a good, and our conditions state that when prices go up, consumer incomes will not change. Prices have gone up, but ceteris paribus, everything else remains the same. Consumer incomes are the same, nobody's had a pay rise, so that rise in the price of good is going to affect everybody within the country. If we didn't use ceteris paribus, for example, when we evaluate, we could be saying that we raised the price of a good, however, every single worker in the United Kingdom has had a pay rise. That will change the results of the examination of price rises. If we go ceteris paribus, this allows us to identify the impact in changes of one variable, i.e. the price of a good, on the second variable, demand, without having to worry about anything else that can go on that's going to give us 10, 20, 30 different results. So that ceteris paribus lets us create almost scientific conditions in what we do. And every diagram that we draw, that you draw with Tim and that you're going to be drawing with me, then becomes a static model. Static means a point in time. So those demand curves that you're going to be drawing for bananas, for tobacco, for copper, for nickel, whatever, with Tim in theme 1, are at a point in time. You can then draw another diagram that will explain what could happen a minute later, okay? So we could state that ceteris paribus, an increase in the price of bananas would lead to a decrease in their demand. We know that humans are cheap, okay? So if bananas went up by £1, there's going to be less demand. That's ceteris paribus. We're ignoring the fact that there could be changes with regards to bananas at the same time. A new report shows previously unknown life-enhancing properties of bananas. You see, if we know that as human beings, a rise in the price of bananas, we may choose to ignore that rise in the price and still pay for it if it's going to enhance our life, okay? There you go. Hopefully that makes sense. So ceteris paribus, we're looking at two variables only in the banana example, the price of bananas and the demand for bananas, and that almost makes it a scientific experiment, okay? So we are social scientists, we are looking at society and individual and group behavior, but we don't have a laboratory unless we say ceteris paribus. And that's a really good cop-out for me as a teacher. If ever you ask me a question and I don't know the answer to it, I'm just going to say ceteris paribus. And that means everything else is the same. Okay. If that doesn't make sense, rewind a couple of minutes or 5 minutes, rewatch this again. Obviously, hit me up via an email or in Classroom if you need that ceteris paribus explaining. Let's go into the language then. So, his car is green is a positive statement. It is objective. It is factually based. We can test it by going to B&Q and doing what I said with the kind of paint testers. His car is green. There was no opinion. There was no prejudice. Okay. So positive statements allow scientific testing to take place that can be accepted or rejected. If I'm standing next to a green car and I've got that green paint tester, you cannot reject the fact that I've told you. I have factual backing. For example, the unemployment rate is 8% is a positive statement because it is based on factual evidence. You can go to the local job centre, you can go online, and you can know that the unemployment rate is 8%. And there will be data, benefit claims, unemployment claims to back that up. So positive statements, impartial, unbiased. And whenever you're analysing, whenever you're giving the benefit of something, usually you need to base that on factual evidence, okay? And I'll come back to that point when I set your homework at the end of this session. All right, his car is an awful shade of green is a normative statement. Is an awful shade of is subjective, it's my opinion. It's questionable, all right? You could say, well, I don't think it's awful. And we can't really test it's an awful shade of green because how do you quantify an awful shade of green? It's also showing, and we've already said opinion, that I've got a bit of prejudice against the colour green, okay? Just like we can be prejudiced against a football team, whatever. I can really hate the colour green. I don't, by the way. So, for example, the third bullet point, the government should increase spending to help reduce the unemployment rate. Have a little think, what word makes that normative and not positive? The word is should. That's my opinion. The government should increase spending to help reduce the unemployment rate. If that sentence said the government are increasing spending to help reduce the unemployment rate, that then becomes positive because we can look online, we can prove that to be true. The government should increase spending is a value judgment. A value judgment is a statement that I'm putting forward that I cannot factually verify. Maybe the government shouldn't. I'll say that again. Maybe the government should not shouldn't, increase their spending to reduce the unemployment rate. Maybe they should cut their spending. Maybe they should stop paying money on benefits and almost force unemployed people to go out and get a job. Brutal, I know. But that could be an opinion. That's a value judgment. And that would show, if I was to say that I'm in some way prejudiced against unemployed people, that I think they're all lazy, we should stop paying them benefits, and they should get out to work. That's obviously not my view. That's just an example. Now, the problem is that quite a lot of students, and many that I've seen throughout the years, will use normative statements in their analysis, okay? When we analyse, we really want to see factual backups. It's when you start saying however, and again, when I set you your homework, this will become more obvious to you, that's when you can start using normative statements and value judgments, okay? So just to sum up then, to the left, normative statements are partial or biased, and value judgments are opinions that you put forward that are really untestable, an awful shade of green. All right, so in pairs, well, obviously you can't by yourself, and you can just jot this down. You can even just think about this. I want you to think about examples of when these different professions use positive and normative statements. Give me an example. All right, so if you want to pause now, have a little think, have a little jot down, and I'll give you a few examples. Okay, so I'm going to come back now. This is mad. I keep on saying pause, but there we go. All right, so politicians, slippery politicians. Let's think about Donald Trump. Has Donald Trump ever said anything that is positive? Probably not. Everything he says, he is the king of normative statements. We're going to build a wall is normative. It sounds positive because it sounds like facts, but there is no evidence that a wall is going to be built. Who's going to build this wall? Apparently the Mexicans, which is what he wants or wanted. Where's the money going to be coming from? So a positive sounding statement then becomes normative. But if Donald Trump says we are building a wall with Mexican labor and it's going to cost $40 billion, then we've got a bit of positivity. We can test that statement. I'm going to go to the border between Mexico and Texas, as it is in America, and I'm going to see if a wall is being built. News reporters are interested. The BBC has to be positive. They have to report facts. The taxpayer pays for the BBC. So I'm just going to look at the time. Lovely. The taxpayer pays for the BBC and we pay for facts. If you've ever been out to America or watched American news channels like CNN, NBC, ABC, they're very different. The news reporters will make very normative statements. Quite often they'll report the facts. Okay, so a man was murdered in Chicago last night. And then, if that was the BBC, they would stop. But in America, they're allowed to be a bit more normative, so they will make the positive statement of a man was murdered in Chicago last night. And then they might say normatively, and in this reporter's opinion, gun crime is out of control, Chicago needs to be sorted out, we need to send the army in. Okay? That becomes their normative opinion. A sports commentator, positive comment, Arsenal 1, Tottenham 0. Arsenal 1, Tottenham 0. A normative statement could be, what a fantastic result. This is the greatest day in football. It's Arsenal 1, Tottenham 0. They've taken that positive of the football score and then they've put their normative opinion on it by saying, what a great day, best day in football. You can probably guess who I support through that, although I try not to go on about football. And what about your teachers? Positive, the time is For you this afternoon, the time is 4:30. Let's start the lesson. All right, the time is 4:30. It's positive. Normative. Every single one of you, your behaviour is absolutely terrible. I can't say that because I can't test that at one point, every single one of you are going completely mad and jumping out the windows. Okay? Think about it. All right, now, value judgments are absolutely key in economic decision making and policy. Let's think about the government. Government make economic policies, okay? But we as economic agents, we're consumers, businesses as kind of firms that invest within the economy, and governments, as we know from last time we met, have to choose between alternative opinions. And we know that for everything that we do, we buy Pepsi. And I know I just said do. We buy Pepsi, we lose the next best alternative of Fanta, for example. And as I put there, by increasing government spending on education, the opportunity cost is not increasing spending on prisons. If governments only ever base their decisions on positive statements, we assume that there's going to be certain outcomes. Increasing the price of a good, don't worry about the word normal, Tim will go through that with you, is going to be reducing demand. But the problem is, that makes life really rigid. The government will only do things that they think are going to work. Okay? We're going to build a new prison in area X, even if the residents don't want it there. Even if there's not enough prisoners to come to the prison, we're still going to build that prison because the data says that we should. But we know that fourth bullet point, the future by definition is uncertain. Maybe offending in that area might drop. Maybe the residents will start to complain. So this means that choices have to be made that will lead to uncertain outcomes. And that means that people that work in government, that work in economics, cannot just stick to the facts. They also need to think about their opinions and they almost need to predict the future. And if you live your life only based on facts, you would, if anyone watches it, I think it's terrible, but it didn't used to be, you'd be almost like Sheldon in the Big Bang Theory, wouldn't you? You live your life by spreadsheets and by calculations, and that becomes a very boring life. Sometimes we need to make value judgments, and sometimes government needs to make value judgments because we cannot predict the future. We have to have that gut feeling, okay? And also, when we're making decisions in economics on a positive and a normative basis, we need to think about what might influence people's views when making those choices. Okay, so people's views concerning the best option are influenced by two things. We do like positivity, we do like positive consequences, but outcomes and life are always very subjective. Life doesn't always go the way that we want it. Normative statements are based on value judgments, and it's not always easy to clearly see whether one option is better than another. We come back to the idea of Brexit. Now, I probably mentioned my dad before. He's a figure of comedy for me. He's an ex-cab driver, 40 years driving around in a black cab. He's a Daily Mail reader, 40 years reading the Daily Mail. He's been in the Daily Mail. He loves the Daily Mail. So I bet you can guess how he voted for Brexit. He voted to leave, obviously. I'm a clear Remainer, all right? It's as simple as that. If we were going to go down the positive line, there's no data about Brexit yet. He can't say that he's right. Brexit is going to be an amazing success. I can't say that I'm right. Brexit is going to be a massive failure. So we can't make positive statements about Brexit. But normatively, every time I go and talk to him, he's, oh, Brexit, fantastic. And I'm like, no, it's absolutely terrible, okay? So we don't know the positive consequences yet. Therefore, we can only have normative opinions. But when the government are making choices, when we're making choices, we also bring in morals and we bring in our own political bias, okay? The best option for an individual may differ than that of the best option for society as a whole. We all have our own self-interest economically. So the extent to which self-interest is the best way to meet the needs of society is an emotive subject. There's a question there: to what extent would you sacrifice yourself to help meet the greater needs of society as a whole? Well, we've been doing that since March during this lockdown, and the kind of positive data, the positive facts said that if we stayed at home, washed our hands, only went to the shops, isolated, factually speaking, coronavirus wouldn't spread as much, and we saw that, okay? So we did sacrifice ourselves for the needs of society as a whole. But a lot of people think in normative ways during lockdown were walking into shops without face masks, they were congregating en masse, all these illegal raves in forests and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, not a good look. Okay, so if this was the end of today's lesson properly, I'd make you write down one positive, one normative statement about today's lesson. You'd probably write, it's boring, etc., etc. And there is a little multiple choice question there. Which of the following is a positive statement? Have a pause, have a little think, and I'll give you the answer. Now, I need to read through this myself. The government should, so it's not going to be A, that's a normative statement. The inflation rate has been above the government target for 2% for over a year. That sounds pretty factual. Has been, so it could be B. C, society should, I don't need to read any further, should makes it normative. There needs to be a change of government. No, there needs to be, is someone's opinion. So the positive statement is the inflation rate has been above the government target of 2% for over a year. Okay, I think that is my PowerPoint done. So here's what I want you lot to do. First thing, I'm going to attach this worksheet, all right, and I'm going to time limit this until Sunday evening, I do believe. Simply speaking, positive and normative economic statements, answer question 1, answer question 2, and in question 3, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 statements. You're going to tell me whether they're positive or normative, but the justification, you're going to give me a sentence explaining your decision, okay? So I'm going to post this as an assessed piece of work, and I will time limit that until Sunday evening. You need to get it done by Sunday evening. I think that is that for the lesson. It is indeed. So, any questions or queries, do let me know in classroom. I've got classroom on my phone, so even though I might be, out and about tonight, I probably won't be actually, given the new lockdown measures and stuff, but I'll be on my phone, so if there are questions or queries, I should be able to respond. What I want to do is I want to set you a piece of homework, okay? You've got here a nice piece of writing about migration in the United Kingdom in 2014-2015. And we're going to set you a 12-mark question. Discuss the possible impact on the British economy of 25,000 fewer immigrants coming to study in the UK per year, okay? And that's 12 marks. So straight away, go back to those exam structures that I showed you at the start of this video lesson, and there we go. paragraph 1 definition, paragraph 2 and 3, 2 answers to the question, and then paragraphs 4 and 5, 2 howevers. Of course, there's nothing stopping you doing paragraph 1 definition, paragraph 2 answer the question, then evaluating your first point, then your second answer to the question, then evaluating, giving your counterpoints in the 4th and 5th paragraphs. What I'm also going to attach is this. It's a short PowerPoint just explaining what we're asking for the question. So what you want to do first of all is that you want to reread that question number 2. We're not doing question number 1. We don't need that first question. It's only the 12 marker. And then you want to highlight points of importance in the data that will be relating to that question. Basically speaking, the question is saying, is it good or bad that we've got 25,000 fewer immigrants coming into the United Kingdom? What has happened to immigration numbers overall? The question is focusing on those coming to study, 25,000 less coming to study, but what happened in 2015 to immigration figures overall? Did they drop or did they go up? That might set a bit of context for the question. So in terms of the structure then, paragraph 1, introduction, it says there what is net migration. I mean, you can Google that. Net migration is people coming in, take away people leaving, okay? That bit that says diagram, PPF, can you ignore completely, because we haven't done that yet. We're going to do that next week. And the way that we're suggesting then is that you give, third bullet point, 2 negative impacts of less immigration on the UK economy. And then you're going to evaluate with however and on the other hand by giving potentially 2 benefits of less immigration to the UK economy. Again, a normative statement, don't think that there's any benefit of immigration dropping. I think that we need more highly skilled workers, more highly skilled students. You may disagree, be normative. So you can use this to kind of prepare. You can jot down 2 arguments. I know there's 3 boxes. You can jot down 2 arguments for immigration, 2 arguments against. Be as normative as you wish, or be as factual, be as positive as you wish. I'm then going to work it by, if you give me a basic definition, basic diagram we can't really do yet. We haven't done any diagrams for me, so you can ignore that. And kind of 1 line of analysis, I'm going to give you between 1 and 2 marks. All right, but don't worry too much about that. The deadline, sorry, let me just check on that, and I'll put this in Classroom, is going to be next Wednesday for the homework and Sunday for the classwork. I will make this all clear to you on Classroom. All right, so any questions, queries, concerns, please do let me know. Otherwise, have a good twilight session, have a good weekend, and I will see you next week. Adios.